Not that one, no.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, could we have the reading of the mission statement?
Richmond Community Schools guide students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
And the vision statement.
Richmond Community Schools, a collaborative community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
All right, thank you both. Next, we move on to celebrations. Dr. Wright.
President Stoltz, trustees, I'm going to ask that Mr. Mark Fowler, our Chief of Secondary Education, introduce our Lilly Award winner and our celebratory students this evening. Ms. Fowler.
Awesome, Dr. Wright, thank you, trustees. We're very excited tonight to introduce Olivia Dudas. Olivia, you can come up to the front here. Olivia is the winner of the prestigious Lilly Endowment Award. For those of you who, For those of you who don't know a little bit about the scholarship, it is 4 years, full paid tuition, including some books and some extra expenses at any private or public institution in Indiana. So we are extremely proud. And so, Olivia, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask you a few questions. First is, who did you bring with you tonight?
I brought my mom, Andrea, and my aunt, Elise.
Okay, awesome. So I have 3 questions for you, and then I'm going to open it up to the board. First one is, who has been your biggest cheerleader through this process?
Oh man, that's a tough call. I'm gonna have to say my mom.
Okay, why is that?
She's just always there. There's never been a moment where she's absent, and yeah, I don't really know how to put it into words, but yeah.
Okay, my second question is, what's been your fondest memory of RCS?
There's a lot.
Yeah, put her on the spot.
I think the one that stands out the most is the most recent State Fair Band Day. Our show this year was really good, and I wasn't, expecting that or used to that. And it was just really special, and for the community and band, at least. And it was just beautiful.
And then my last question is, obviously, this is such a huge award to win, and we're so proud of you as a school, as a community. I know your parents are as well. What type of legacy would you hope to leave for the students that follow behind you, that see that you win something like this? What would you hope that they kind of take from that?
I hope they are inspired by work ethic and just keeping your eye on the prize, just staying focused, because that's what I've done for the past 4 years, and it's worked out pretty well. And just not spreading yourself too thin, because when you do that, you're not really focusing on what you want to do with your future. And I think I did that pretty well, and I know exactly what I want to do with my life. So, yeah.
What is that you'd like to do with your life?
I want to become a band director, so I'm going to go for music education in college.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're extremely proud of you. I'm going to open the floor up to the trustees to ask additional questions if they like, but we're extremely proud of you, and congratulations.
So did I hear Butler? Is that?
Yes.
Yay. That's where I did my undergraduate, so I'm very excited about that. Yes, questions?
I just have a comment. I just wanted to say, I just like what you said. Don't spread yourself too thin so you can focus on your goals. And I'm all like, I'm writing that down. Like, for someone your age, like, that's very impressive. Like, winning this is an amazing feat. So just total kudos. Congratulations.
They're saying
Take
Dr. Wright and I would be honored to get a picture with you. That's what this little side discussion is all about.
As the questions conclude, we will.
Yes.
So Butler University, huh?
Yes.
Earlham didn't cross your mind?
Let's have a picture.
No. Yes, Fallon,
Miss Elsmeyer.
Oh, she's got it? Okay, great.
That is a very valuable scholarship.
Yes.
My stepdaughter was a Lilly Butler.
Oh, really?
Thank you.
All right.
And yeah, we're super excited for you. This is 2 years in a row, so you're kind of setting a precedent.
Yeah.
So did I hear you say you're coming after Merkamp's job in a couple of years? I'm just trying to create a little friendly rivalry.
Well, actually, that was going to be my question. And I shamelessly encourage all of our students, and you'll hear me again during the commencement speech. I have a shameless plug for the city of Richmond and coming back to South to serve in this city. And so, do this band camp. I like it. It already has a ring to it. And so we'll work with HR and see what we can do. Is that moving too fast?
No, I'll just tell you. I mean, I've been blessed to be a parent watching band, and just over the past 2 years to see the improvement and the camaraderie and the discipline you guys have gotten. You know, we're all biased up here, and we thought you finished better than you did at State Fair this year. But I'm sorry to open an old wound there.
Yes.
But then to seeing what goes into summer band and everything that goes there, and for you to have the maturity to talk about not spreading yourself too thin, that's impressive and important lesson for students to learn, because it can get overwhelming so fast. So, congratulations.
And glad that,
Congratulations to Andrew.
so glad that you're following in the footsteps of your mom, your aunt, your cousins, and everyone else. I know how much music is a part of your family. And I'm not going to ask the question, but I know that it's such an important part of your life and what has led you to this point. My daughter's on faculty at Butler, and I'll let her know that you're coming.
Again, congratulations.
Thank you again.
Congratulations.
All right, so next we have our highlights and happenings. Dr. Wright, 3.1.
President, schools, trustees, come before you this evening with my highlights and happenings. Throughout the course of this year, we have acknowledged and celebrated the positive synergy that continues to permeate throughout our school corporation. And of such synergy, it is being exercised there at Dennis Middle School. We in our community has understood that Dennis has had some unique needs that we are working to meet, and I shared with our board and found in the public access that behavioral incidents at Dennis Middle School are down tremendously and very significantly throughout the course of this semester. We have seen and continue to experience such positive synergy in that area, along with other areas throughout the corporation, and definitely there at Dennis. As I mentioned in the correspondence, Abraham Maslow, a psychologist, had always argued in his hierarchy of needs theory that having safety and security at its basis and at its nexus is the first step in reaching self-actualization. And so, again, kudos to the faculty, staff, administrative team, our central office leaders who have been supporting our teams there at Dennis, as well as throughout our corporation in addressing such matters. As far as a happening, last week I was participating in the fall conference there in Indianapolis for the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents, as we are approaching the strategic planning processes for spring 2024. Brought some nuggets of knowledge back, as well as some great conversations with superintendents and leaders throughout the state that have successfully implemented a strategic planning process, just as we have in the past, but there's some new things that we'll be introducing to you all in the months to come. And so with that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Brent Baker, our Chief of Elementary Education, with his highlight and happening. Mr. Baker.
Alrighty, we are seeing an increase in daily student attendance in our buildings. Our hard work and dedication to attendance is making a positive impact on RCS. In January, we're going to start an RCS attendance trophy called the RCS Attendance Cup. This trophy will be delivered every Monday morning to the building with the highest attendance rate from the previous week. And here's the trophy. So we're gonna have little clips for each school's mascot. The high school is 3D printing little logos about this big around. So we're gonna clip on kind of like the old open bucket, so you can see where the trophy's been, and that will travel around every Monday morning. So
they like collect?
yeah, but I think they have little clips that clip on the handles.
Okay, so those clips stay on there week after week?
Yep.
Okay, got it, thanks.
And we're also finishing up the iReady reading and math assessment for the middle of the year. And we are initially seeing some strong growth on both of these assessments.
Mr. Fowler, our Chief of Secondary Education, I know he shared his highlight for your happenings, sir.
Yeah, so for our happenings, we had a presentation to about 500 juniors and seniors by Dr. Lucinda Wright, and the presentation was entitled Collective Brilliance Competition for the Arts. This competition focuses on art, dance, essay, the written word, and spoken word. And the winner of these competitions get $1,000 scholarships to IU East, Earlham, and or 6 free credits to Ivy Tech. So they came and presented to the juniors and seniors, opened up that application window. So any interested junior or senior at Richmond High School who wants to apply in any of those areas is free to apply. And if they win, they get scholarship money towards that university. So it was really, really cool. Kids were really engaged in the presentation and excited about the opportunity to get some free money. So it's great.
Mrs. Margaret, our Chief of Secondary Education.
Our Hibbards Applied Skills team was spotlighted in the Western Wayne News for their community project of getting 1,000 cards to local veterans. They provided them Christmas cards, a class photo, and an ornament. They went to a veterans banquet, the Journey Home in Winchester, and a local VFW. The students also sang some Christmas carols and signed some Christmas carols for members who were deaf or hard of hearing. So I just wanted to share and highlight that it's fabulous to see our students sponsored or spotlighted in local media. And then a happening that we have going around the district right now is professional development provided by our EL team on how to support our English language learners in the classroom to teachers around the district. With an increase of our EL population, and especially students who don't speak any English at all, Kristen Jones and members of our EL team have been providing that PD support to all the schools. Some of their objections and visions of the PD were to help teachers understand our process in identifying and testing our potential EL students, helping them understand their individual learning plans and accommodations that they have within the classrooms. They take WEDIS assessments, and so understanding the data and reports that come from those assessments, and then how to utilize those scores within the classroom and the can-do descriptors of what they're ready to learn within the classroom. So I wanted to share that that was being provided to the teachers around the district.
Thank you, Mrs. Margaret. Next will be our Chief of Operations, Mrs. Karen Scalf, with her highlighting happening.
Good evening. If you have not noticed, our buildings are very alive with activities. We have a number of music programs going on this month over at Civic Hall, so they have been on their toes every night with all of our schools, welcoming their families in for choir, orchestra, band. Everything has been happening almost every night, along with symphony and Civic Hall performances. So it is a busy month over there. Please stop by. Feel welcome to see what our kids can do. It's been fun. Some of it has been posted to our social media pages as well as YouTube, just to give a little highlight of what we do here at Richmond. And it's really phenomenal. So kudos to our music program directors, our choir directors, everybody involved. You've done a wonderful job. A huge thank you to RHS Athletics. They have really moved the dial on younger student activities. So we are also busy out in buildings with YMCA activities as well as Dirt Road League games on the basketball front. We have girls and boys activities happening nearly every night of the week and also on the weekends. So our buildings are super busy. Great thanks to our custodial staff that are keeping us running amidst all that is going on. And a huge thank you to those community partners that are making it happen for our younger kids as well. That will be really good to see as they grow and continue in RCS athletic programs and activities. So as far as a happening, I'd like to welcome a couple of new faces to RCS. So Jesse Deaver is now our director of Chartwell's Dining Services. He has been with us in the interim status for a couple of months while Nick Koenig has received a promotion. So he has really jumped right in, gotten to know us, gotten to know what we do here, and is working for us diligently to make sure that continued improvements always are occurring in our cafeterias. Also welcome Sierra Bennett. She is with us as our new Director of Nursing. Allison Ward has received a promotion with the Meridian team, and so Sierra just started her first full week this week. She does come to us from Reed. She has a lot of experience, so she's jumping right in and getting to know what we do out in our buildings. The RHS clinic is also open and running. We have a nurse practitioner there on staff, and she has been really great to get to know our kids, be out in every building, seeing what we do, and then making herself available for appointments as needed. So all of those things are happening, and in addition to that, I just have to give a super huge shout out because right now, amidst our staff, we are working in the technology department a lot. They are rolling out some cybersecurity improvements. You will see board members, multi-factor authentication is a big deal right now, and we are trying very swiftly to get our staff on that because it does protect us from breaches. We had a breach a little bit earlier this semester, and knowing that that can resolve all of that that we saw earlier this year, just huge kudos to Alex Hazelbaker and his team because they have tackled that very monstrous task very quickly and super effectively. So it has been really busy in my department, but making some good things happen around the district.
Thank you, Mrs. Scout. Next will be Mrs. Jamie Bolzer, our Chief of Human Resources and Finance. Mrs. Bolzer.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. So for the highlights, I would say the business department, I'm very impressed with the speed in which they expedited the teacher appreciation grant in a separate payroll and issued that on December 8th so that we could get the much deserving money in the pockets of our hardworking teachers. I would also like to express my gratitude to the HR and business teams. They have been working tirelessly. I can't stress that enough on implementing the extensive language as a result of the newly ratified contract in a very small window of time. And I'm in awe of their dedication to our school and to our staff. We have also been onboarding many new substitutes throughout the last couple weeks. And Lisa in my office, she is exhausted by it, but it's a great exhaustion. And in speaking to our principal team and our leadership team earlier today, they have all felt that effect by having more substitutes readily available. So that's definitely a highlight I wanted to touch on. And happening, the HR team visited every building over the last couple months as we personally helped our staff with the insurance renewal. So they were out in all of the buildings to aid and assist our staff with that. And also we've been out visiting buildings, celebrating our staff and showing them our continued appreciation by taking just a drink cart and some snacks around and just letting them know that we appreciate them and we're making our way throughout the district.
Mrs. Bolzer, if I'm not mistaken, I know that he's in the crowd and he's shy and bashful, but I believe Mr. Lee also toured with you all around the corporation.
He did.
With regard to setting up benefit package. And so we thank Mr. Lee and the dedicated service
Yes, thank you.
Richmond Education Association. Mrs. Hazelbaker in Communications and Marketing, throughout the past month, she and I have met with a few vendors to look at how we can approach our upcoming strategic planning processes as well as continue to make improvements within the website. And, I know that we have a great team here in technology that has also been working diligently and hard at approaching it. And there was also mentioned, and I'll conclude, that I share a few of those statistics, improvements there at Dennis Middle School when it comes to behavior. For example, the number of incidents between August and November of 2022 compared to August to November of 2023 was down. In 2022, there were 252 behavioral incidents at Dennis Middle School. This year, in that same time frame, it's down to 81. Acts of defiance from 205 to 103. Fighting and unfortunate physical aggression from 68 to just well under 30. And so again, a lot of great things happening, not only in our departments, but also there within our respective schoolhouses. So thank you.
All right. Other discussion from board members? Other highlights and happenings or things that you guys have? No? Okay. I know Kim, Kristen, and I were able to visit Test between our two board meetings, our last one, and each got to plug in different areas. Elizabeth, I was thinking of you when I was with the ESL program with those kiddos, and really enjoyed that, of course, because they're all Spanish speaking in that class, and so it was like, oh, this is fun. Right. Also got to mix in with an English class and was very impressed with the concepts they were covering. I was thinking, okay, this has got to be like high school level stuff, but here it is, a Test. So that was, and we got to connect with Mrs. Brazel and hear how things are going. So, and where did you guys end up? I don't remember.
I was in a classroom project, Lead the Way classroom, where they were designing and building a structure that could withstand a wind tunnel. And so they were actually physically building it and then testing it. They had hair dryers and fans and standards for where it needed to be and how long it had to withstand it. So that was fun. And then also in a science/math classroom. So great visits.
Yeah. Kim, you were in the
I ended up in PE,
yes.
Which was actually really fun. They were learning some volleyball fundamentals, which volleyball is near and dear to my heart. So, it was great. They were starting on the short little nets and just sort of learning, starting with 3 bounces and then 2 bounces, and then how do you sort of work up. So, really impressed. All the students were great. Honestly, PEs, who doesn't love that class. But yeah, I mean, I'm a Test Tiger, so it was great to see. I had never seen the new wing that was built probably 20 years ago at this point, but yeah, great to be there. So
yeah, and we also really enjoyed the houses concept. They have 5 houses for those who haven't heard about these, and they're all, well, you could probably speak to it a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's similar to the teaming concept, and where there's house time where they do celebrations and rallies, and it's a place for kids to go to with a common teacher that really knows those students, and so it's a version of teaming at
I
Test.
thought it was a version of Harry Potter, but it was the same.
Actually STEM.
Women's championships later on this year.
Well, this is in the continuous. If you all recall, last year we celebrated the Get Your Teach On initiative that took part and took interest and invested time, energy, and even money into our corporation and that Test. They not only transformed a few classrooms, but introduced the concept of the housing. And I know that with our leadership there at Test, along with amazing faculty and staff, they've continued to build upon that concept.
I got to go over to Dennis for a little bit today.
Okay.
And I'd seen the graphics in the main area, but I'd not seen the graphics all the way down.
Don't they look great?
It's amazing. It looks very professional. Obviously, it's very professionally done, and it just really makes that schoolhouse look really nice. And thanks again to I almost call Miss Warfield, Miss Hanley, kind of walked me around a little bit, showed me a little bit what's going on, and just I got there at the most chaotic time of the day during lunch, and just to see the kids interact and the faculty, the way they interacted with the students was really amazing, and you could tell they loved being there. So it was really refreshing to see, and just I was happy to see it. And again, thanks to Mrs. Hanley for kind of walking me around.
And I kind of forgot about it. Last Friday went to the ISBA December Law Seminar. Mr. Cross was there, so I got the pleasure of sitting at an attorney table. But really fascinating, just learning about sort of what's coming down the pike, some outstanding litigation that's kind of going around in the state of Indiana. Things that are kind of coming into effect in January. So yeah, things you kind of see it and you hear it, and then they really dig in, and I thought they did a great job of not even really sugarcoating things. Like, this is kind of what it is, this is what to expect. I appreciate that. So you sort of really understand the gravity of things that are changing, things you need to watch for. So yeah,
Was there anything that we need to be aware of that either of you kind of?
Yes.
No, there's some things about certain books that, having a process to implement how we look at book bans or if someone has concern. So, really creating a process to address those if it comes up. What else did you take away from that? Did
They have like a protocol for deaccessioning or like a protocol? What are they saying that we should be doing?
It's fairly detailed, and it arises from House Enrolled Act 1447. So I think Ms. Balzer and Mr. Mops are working on getting something in front of you, but this is a bit unusual in that, one, it's distressing to think that the effect of the statute could criminalize violations of the statute as found by a trier of fact, be a jury, or I think that's a scare factor, but I think it's, who wants to walk that fine line? I don't want any of you walking it. We're a little behind the time frame because I'm not sure if Neola's really got anything to us yet or not.
There's a meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
But we'll get it done. But there's a very it's reasonably well drafted as far as what you need to have in place. The board will have much more input on what would normally be considered administrative guidelines in implementing the general policy, because the statute speaks almost consistently in the parts that we're talking about of both the board developing policies and procedures. The procedures being primarily focused upon creating a structure to allow those listed in the statute as having standing, usually a patron in your district or teacher in our district. The definition of who can bring a challenge is subject to being extended by the board if they so chose, and allowing a process to have that piece of material vetted first, presumably by the staff at the staff level, with those who are familiar, librarians, obviously, teachers, other stakeholders. Again, the board has a big hand in figuring out how this is going to be done. And then secondly, and ultimately, it comes to the board. And there's some timelines you have to hear. Once you get the result of the board's or the school building's review of the complaint, then you hear it, and then, like I say, after that, the aggrieved person could take it to the prosecutor and see if there's any desire to prosecute a board's refusal to take a piece of material off the shelves or limit its access. So without delving into anything of sounding somewhat politically motivated, I think any person in education looking at this statute would have some concerns. Is that a fair statement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
All
I
right.
might be reading some books.
No.
But, and the other big one I took away was third-party surveys. So if you use a third party to do surveys that collects data.
That statute does speak to that somewhat, and there's other. I actually didn't attend that one because I was getting.
You were the other one.
I was getting my ethics.
Yes.
My ethics booster once a year.
Yes. It's more around if you actually use a third-party company to do surveys for anything and they collect student data. There's a notification that has to go out to parents, the community. They have to respond to it. If they don't respond, you have to send out another notice. After the second notice, you can go ahead and submit the survey. But just timelines, it sort of backs up some timelines. If we were ever to use a third party, if it's conducted by a school employee, it's different, concept. But just being careful about, whatever the department, if it comes from,
And I think the most humbling presentation from my personal point of view was from John Mays, who presented on artificial intelligence, or the counterpart being my genuine ignorance. But it was very technically oriented, and again, cautioned on use of intellectual products that might have built-in bias. And beyond that, I guess it kind of went over my head, but I got the materials if anybody, like our IT folks, can take a look at.
Yeah, it really was fascinating. A lot of it was around the HR space of recruiting and having, bias in
recruiting, hiring.
I think a lot of that was still sort of to come in that space. But they made the comparison of, when you are teaching kids and you don't want them to use AI, or we're talking about ChatGPT to write reports, but then we allow teachers to use that functionality to help them grade, just making sure that,
There aren't double standards.
or there are double standards, but at the same time, this is where we're moving to. So you want your kids to learn these functions and how it works. And then, plus old school of going to the library, that doesn't happen anymore. Checking out books and going through encyclopedias, but yeah.
Kim obviously got more out of it than I did. That speaks to the generational difference.
We appreciate it. Okay, and then I do know, Kristen and Dr. Wright, you guys both did the bowling last night. Was that
That was exciting. Yeah, we got to see the girls team and the boys team. I got to chat with Logan Brewer's dad. Logan is the student that we read about that scored the perfect game along with the 277, so combined at 577, which was a record, which was amazing.
That's amazing.
And I also learned that bowling, you can bowl now with just your two fingers. There's no hole for a thumb, and some people do the two. It's fascinating, more revolutions, and there's a lot that I learned, but just the excitement and the camaraderie between all the local teams and just the kids and just the support. It was full there last night. It was fun to watch.
Fellowship and fun.
Yes.
They have promised that they are going to come
Yes.
to us in the near future to be present, to give us an update on their successes, so.
And to Member Stevens' point, they were celebrating senior night some 15, 20 minutes ago. And had we not rescheduled this meeting, I think we all would have been there to celebrate the honor. But I safely assure them that as Member Stevens referenced, we'll be bringing them back to the podium to recognize them for the champions that they have been for so long. And we anticipate they'll be this upcoming year. It was fantastic. Hadn't been at Do Re Mi in a long time. Wasn't as smoky last night as it's been there in the 80s.
All right, moving on. We've got public commentary. Cindy, go ahead. How many do we have?
We have two.
Two, okay. All right, so before people come to the podium, I'll just read, the Board of School Trustees recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on corporation matters. The board wants to ensure that the public feels welcome and the concerns are answered in a timely and efficient manner. The maximum time for individual speakers is 5 minutes per person. The board expects personal decorum and factual information from the speaker. The president reserves the right to interrupt the speaker when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or if it interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting. Comments recognizing the work of staff and students are always welcome. However, critical remarks concerning specific school personnel or students are to be made through the complaint process available in Policy 8130. School board members do not respond to public comments during the meeting. The public participant will receive a personal follow-up email from the board president within a week. All right, Cindy?
Our first person is Debbie Carter.
And actually, Reverend Chappelle is with me as well. Good evening, board. Thank you so much for allowing this opportunity for us to come and speak with you. And we are representing the Richmond Education Association Racial Equity Coalition. And the two of us are actually on the NAACP committee, education committee, and our role on the board is to, represent our group and to bring interest to that sort. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight about the the diversity and inclusion policy that we've been speaking about for, I guess, since September of last year was the first time that we brought notice that we would really like to work with the board to get this implemented. So again, the REC, Racial Equity Coalition, is a group of educators. We have union members from the Teachers Association. We have students. We have parents, community members like Reverend Chappelle and myself. And again, we're here to urge you to prioritize the implementation of the equity policy, the board equity policy. Just a few things I wanted to run through to just talk about why we believe this is important. We believe that our students should feel safe, valued, encouraged, and receive the best education for each of them. And we know that there's not a one size that fits all. So, we have to be flexible in that area. And in order to do this, we have to have some type of structure in place to address and to guide some of the decisions that we make. Things like teacher recruitment, teacher retention, curriculum selection, disciplinary and social justice practices, inclusion practices, and encouraging diversity in every area. And we have shared an example of a draft of an equity policy, but those are some of the few things that addresses. And I was really glad to hear tonight, we're making some progress in a lot of areas, around discipline. There was some discussion on, how to put the curriculum together and things of that nature. So, I think we're all headed in the same direction. It's just, how do we prioritize this? How do we get this moving as quickly as possible? We see this policy as kind of a lens that we would use. I heard Neola was mentioned, to view all policies and guidelines, SOPs, whatever, that are created. So you use this policy to make sure that we are inclusive, right? That we're thinking about diversity and how the impact of a curriculum idea might be. So, something, you have the policy in place, and then, you're thinking about, are we meeting our goals for inclusion when we look at the separate policies? Okay, so standardized testing confirms that our students of color, students with disabilities, students that I don't know if this is the right word, transient, that are moving around from one school district to the other, lower income students are all underperforming when you look at all of our in every category and in all grade levels. I think that's a fact, and you guys have probably talked about that. I want to just recall a quote that John F. Kennedy utilized when he said that a rising tide lifts all boats. So in other words, addressing the issues that are causing these students to underperform is not only going to help them to be better performing and more successful in life, it's going to help all students. White, students of color, women, whatever it might be. So we're looking at a success increase for all of our students, not just for the students that I just spoke of. So, did you want to let you talk about that?
I'd just like to add that when we talk about issues like these, my experience has been down over the years. Back in the 70s, when I first attended the Defense Department Race Relations Equal Opportunity Institute, we thought we had the problem solved. However, we missed the boat, but we tried. But one of the things I learned, people who are involved in the system aren't necessarily individually involved in the problem. But because of the nature of the issue, people get intimidated, afraid, and they back up. I'm asking you to work with us. We don't want to be your enemy. We want to be your partners in achieving an environment that's good and healthy and safe for the students, for the staff, and everybody that's involved. So that's a short sermon.
All right. Okay, so the Racial Equity Coalition, along with the Teachers Association, we're hosting a community forum. And it's got a program designed to engage our community in supporting the implementation and the prioritization of the equity policy. That's going to be on Tuesday, January 16th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m., so 1 hour. And we're gonna be having a meeting at the Morrison Reeves Library down in the bar room. So if you're familiar with the library, that's the lower level. So we'd like to publicly invite you to the board members, Dr. Wright, to this meeting. We're also inviting our community. We've been out getting petitions, we've been talking to community organizations. We've asked the press to attend, and we'd like to do that formally. We do have some invitations that we're gonna share. Let me finish this first, just say that we really think it's important that our board is at this meeting, the school board is at this meeting. Right, we want the community to see that the board feels like this is important, that it's a priority, and that there's some support. And then we want the board to be there so that you can see the number of community members that are supporting this. You know, I'm talking about businesses that we've talked to, parents, and different organizations. So, you know, we want to work, like Reverend Chappelle said, in partnership. We know that there's been a lot going on, you know, the school district that has taken the interest and the time of the school board, but we really feel like, you know, we're past due, right? We're ready to move on this, we hope the board is, and we want to engage you in our going forward with this. This policy lays some very important framework, you know, especially when you're talking about going through policies with Neola and updating them. And basic thing is our students are our future, they're the future of this community. So I don't think any of us believe that there are very few priorities more important than that. So thank you for your time. We do have some invitations we want to hand out.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter.
Okay. Those are for.
Okay.
And then also, here's the flyer that we're posting. Is there any questions or anything that we need to address now?
We're really not allowed to do the question
Okay.
thing.
All
I'm
right.
sorry.
Sure.
No, I appreciate the offer.
All right.
Thank you
for your
both.
time. Thanks a lot.
All right, Cindy, who do we have next?
That was both.
Oh, that was both. Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, so next on our agenda, we have 5.01, our debt issuance projects. Dr. Wright?
President Stoltz, trustees, throughout the course of the past several semesters and for some time, there's been an assessment of our needs, things, and this evening I know that Mrs. Scalf along with Mrs. Bolter, joined by Trey Cross and Mrs. Jane Kindred from V. Eisenmiller, is going to present to us their findings. And so, ladies, the floor is yours.
Good evening. So tonight we are just going to have a discussion. So we're going to go over some things, and I just wanted to let you know I've spent the last few months getting more familiar with where we're at on the facility side, as well as other things, as well as looking at the planning for things that go along with that. It is not a cheap undertaking as we look ahead, and so we're just going to have a discussion, and then we'll kind of ask questions at the end. I'll kind of just let you know what I've seen and what I found. I just want to say thank you to the Warner maintenance team. This has been a all-inclusive conversation. It is really great to be able to talk with them about concerns that they've had on the maintenance side of things that they see that are hard to keep up with, or things that they see as far as timelines on what's our most high priority, where are we seeing the biggest problems, where are things that they see being constant fixes, as we look at the option to look at proactive maintenance rather than reactive maintenance. Taking all of that into consideration before you tonight is a pretty thorough list of where we're at least for the next short while, on things that are going to come up that we need to talk about. So with that, we're going to begin, and we're going to move to the next slide. As I look at just some goals that I have on the facility side, there are some key points that I always want to remember. The first is that we're enhancing learning environments. That is the very first and utmost priority that we have. The academic side of what we do is utmost, and we all agree around this table that that is the absolute primary focus. So as we look at facilities, that's one thing that I want to make sure that we're always thinking about. Updating dated facilities and infrastructure. That is heavy here. So as we'll talk about toward the end, our buildings are dated. Things look old, feel old, and that's just where we're at. And so knowing that there are pieces to it that we could either do differently, improve, look ahead to, we'll be talking about that as well. The next thing is to improve security features. No matter what we do, we always want to make sure we're always improving the security side of things, either from the infrastructure side or the visual side, or just from, there have been years that we made changes because it felt better. That's reality, and that's how security works. And we always want to make sure that we're considering that as we are looking at the goals for our facilities. The other thing that we do that is something that people might not think about, but we at the schools do, is that we want to positively impact our neighborhoods, parking, traffic, flow throughout our buildings. Our playgrounds are really used in the evenings, in the summers. They really are a place where the kids of our neighborhoods can go for a nice, safe place to play. It is someplace where, personally, I walked my kids down to Westview almost every night in the summer because it was a great place close to home that you could use free of charge. So in reality, when we look at our facilities, how it impacts that neighborhood presence is always a thought process as we look at what we do. All right, we're gonna keep rolling. There are some assumptions that we're gonna just work through so that you know where I'm at. Most of the costs provided in this presentation are projected. They are solidly projected, I will say that, because it has been numerous days and weeks of conversation with not just our team, with Mr. McCurdy, who I believe is here, who has provided guidance for me on per square foot costs, what to expect, things that we're seeing that need fixed, costs for that. Some of them are actual, and I will go through that in the presentation as we move forward. I will let you know when those are actual costs. The items that are in blue-green, and I say that because I'm never sure how this is going to show up on the screen. It might look more teal, it might look more blue, it might look more green. So we went blue-green tonight. Those are priorities, and you're going to see a lot of them tonight. So I just need you to know that I have color-coded those simply for ease as we're working through this, to know that they are heavy on my list of what we've got to do soon. Okay, so what are some things that enhance learning environments? First and foremost, it's programming. You think about programming and you think about comfort. So when you talk comfort, you can't see it, you feel it. We're talking HVAC systems. We're talking like airflow. We're talking furniture. We're talking wall coverings. We're talking color schemes. All of those things are super important to our classrooms and to our buildings as a whole. There are some things that we have that we would like to do maybe differently or look at in the future. One of those is that maybe redeveloping an early learning center for our pre-K students might be something we want to consider. I think it's something of value that has been tossed around off and on. We used to have an early learning center. Knowing that it was, there are pros and cons to everything. So knowing that that's something that we might want to reconsider. We've been kind of thinking about it for a while as we've been able to map out what it looks like right now in buildings and what is best served for our student body. Dennis, HVAC phase 2. Around this table, we've talked about this, and over the course of this last fall, we had to put a substantial amount of additional funds into that building just to keep it cool, because this phase isn't done, nor was the financial planning at the time known. I will put it that way. The original project, phase 1, was through ESSER. And knowing that there are some, what would we call that? fun little parts to that we have to deal with. But knowing that this building, at the end of this phase, will be running on 3 different systems. We will have controlled with 2 different systems, and I have 1 HVAC technician. That alone, there are 28, I have learned a lot in a few months. There are 28 valves throughout that building, just in the new part of this project, which is about half of the classrooms, that he is going to have to go turn on and turn off every time we have to go from boiler to chiller, boiler to chiller. So every spring, every fall, those are in classrooms. They're not in halls. They're not in easy access points. He's got to go in early or stay late or disrupt classroom instruction, and that is never ideal. So finishing this phase would fully complete the project. I have asked that we look at the whole picture because I have not seen this phase. I'm going to be really honest with you. It has not come across my desk yet in specs and documentation. I know it has been delivered to RCS. I understand that. I do not have it. So I have asked for that again. I'm going to reevaluate the whole project, make sure that it fully is a scope that we need in whole. I will also ask for further review of it by professional agencies that just to make sure we're covered, because at the end of this, it better be done. There are accountability things that I've been holding since I moved over. I want a full conversion to the 4-pipe system. That has to be complete at the end of this. We will have full dehumidification in that building. We will have none at the end of phase 1. So we have some major problems that could happen without additional work to get there. And then I want coordination of all the controls between the multiple systems. This is not currently included in that phase. It is something that from a maintenance standpoint we really need, because it should be done better, and it should be done in a way in which it's manageable by the limited amount of team that we have in the maintenance department. So those are some things on that project. I only say that because we have talked about it here, and there are some things in it that the scope looks a little different from what I think the original conversation was, simply because I have found out information as I've gone along, and you need to know that. The other part is at RHS, the library and art wing, it needs a new roof. So every time it rains, now for the first time since August, we hopefully will not have trash cans in the hallways. So we have gotten the last part of that. I say that, and it's going to rain, and we're going to have them. It's without fail. But we do need a new roof over there. Along with that, we have 5 units that are ceiling units. They were not written into the original RHS mechanical modernization project. They are standalone units, and we need to replace those. We have been putting in money to a degree each and every year that they could have paid for themselves about 4 times over now. So that I have planned through ESSER to work through that with the remaining RHS ESSER funds, getting that done. But we do need to complete the roof replacement at the same time so that everything is finished and clean. If you happen to go on the tower, you will know exactly what I mean, because all you have to do is look down and you can see everything right there that we need to do. So that's something that is high on my priority list. If ESSER could fund it all, it will be great. If it can't, I need to be prepared. So that's why we're having that conversation today. All right, moving on. Some increasing security features, areas that I personally feel like we need to address, looking at what we're doing and what I see that we don't have available to us. We need to update public address systems in all student buildings. We are working on RHS right now. We had some issues with the flooding. We had some issues with some power outages that we've recently had that have created some dynamics that make it really hard over there. Those are going to get addressed hopefully over Christmas break in full, but they have already been secured, and they will be here soon to get that fixed. But the other buildings need some attention too. We have buildings that don't even have complete PA systems, or they just aren't super great, and so this 375 is a pretty solid number to update all of our buildings and get that done. I do have a preliminary quote on that, and so that is one of the solid numbers in this presentation. The other thing is RHS lockers. When we pulled them out during the flood, the insurance company deemed them in really good shape. What we know is they're pretty bent up, and they aren't as good as they look. We've made them look pretty good, but they are very old. And on the 3rd floor, they are very small. And so this number is also an exact number. We have already taken the time to get a quote on those lockers. It is something that we feel like is really important to finish that high school, as we've been working the last few years to get things updated. That is one of those things that we've got left to do, and it is something that's pretty important to get done, because it will take us probably multiple summers to get it done. So we need to get that started so that we can continue it. So that is for all 3 floors in all areas of the high school. So that is all current lockers would be replaced. Asphalt improvements is the next thing. This is by no means an exact number. This is a very low number. What I will say is this probably won't even get RHS done. But we have not done parking lots since I've been here, with the exception of maybe one. I've been here 13 and a half years. We have patched them. We have sealed them. We need substantial asphalt work. You will see that as you see kind of crumbling and as you see holes. We patched holes. But that's not always a long-term, really great solution. I think we're all seeing that on our roads. And so we do need significant improvements in that. With that, what you can't see on the screen is that there's another line that says to improve bus and car drop-off and pickup areas. When we do asphalt, the thought is that we reevaluate our bus lanes and how traffic flow works around and in our buildings. We have a much higher number of car riders than we have ever had. We have a much higher number of traffic incidents on our properties because we have so many car riders. And so just knowing that that needs some work, we'd like to look at that when we look at asphalt. Okay, so as we move forward, the next piece is looking at impact to neighborhoods and transportation areas again. And I just reiterate, traffic patterns aren't just about asphalt. Some of it is how we flow around our buildings, where we do pick up, drop off, what we do for just navigational purposes, fencing, things like that. Just really evaluating that. The other thing is playground equipment. We have been trying a little bit at a time to do playgrounds. We still have Baxter, Star, and Vale left to do. Fairview could also use a little bit of a facelift. They've done bits and pieces of that, but it does need a little bit as well. But Baxter, Star, and Vale are kind of the heavy hitters when it comes to playgrounds. We do participate with one of our vendors. Is called Game Time through Sinclair Recreation. They provide a playground matching grant, so we always participate in that. It's up to $75,000, and we do take advantage of that each and every time we do a playground. So they are a really great vendor to work with. They have done most of the playgrounds in our recent history. So they did the Crestdale playground. As you can tell, it's really phenomenal. The work that they did to meet all of those student needs. And then fencing. This could probably go on unlimited. We've got backstops that need stretched and painted. We've got fences everywhere around dentist, tests, high school, you name it, we probably need to paint it. So just knowing that fencing needs to be done again, it has been a number of years since that's been done, and it would really refresh our look out in the community and make things look as best as they can again. Okay, so as we move to the next slide, updating dated facilities. This, what I will say is this also could go on forever. We have, and we'll go to some next slides, but interior renovations, we used to do them on a very frequent basis. It used to be why we issued debt. We do total renovations at buildings. With the changes to legislative tax abilities, things kind of changed around here. We weren't able to do that as often. So, but there are, things that's not even a part of this until later. So just know that that is something that we think about, but we'll talk about it in just a minute. As far as some things that we really need to think about, Fairview. This is an absolute have to. And I almost bolded it and made it like 45 font. The tower and the exterior facade masonry work has to be done over this next 6 months, 9 months. It is a very old building. It was built in 1929. It is in need of some love. The tower needs roofing, and that 503 is a low number. With the roof, we're looking probably more like 650 to 700. We're still working on that. We're getting close. But that would be in conjunction probably between multiple funds. But that Fairview area is going to need some work, and it is on my very short list. It was part of your budgetary facility plan that was provided. It has been provided a number of times. I'll just kind of give you a picture of it so you know what to look for. It's in board docs in past meetings. It's been shared at least twice. So that's there for you if you need to look at it. None of this is a surprise. It's all in there. But I just wanted to let you know you do have that. It also has some tidbits on our facilities, square footage, how many classrooms it holds, max student capacity, things like that. Hibbard is, we're going to hold Hibbard for another, we're going to keep going, and we're going to bring Hibbard back on slides. So we'll talk about Hibbard in just a minute. Just know that the portion that I was talking about here is for the exterior. We're going to keep going on Hibbard in just a minute. Athletic fields, the RHS turf, we've already talked about that, the multi-purpose field that we use not only for football, but for track, for soccer, for a number of activities. And then that will be done this summer. That information has been sent, and we are just awaiting scheduling now. Tennis courts, we need to talk tennis courts. What we're going to do, I would say we are within probably our last year of the surface that we currently have before we'll need to resurface. That usually runs between $35,000 and $45,000. So we do have water issues there that will continue to create those surface issues that we need to rethink that. There are options with that. We could relocate them with McBride. The thought is we're going to move softball over to McBride so that we have a baseball and softball facility there. Tennis could move to where softball is already. It is already graded a little more closely on a flat plane. It does not have water issues. And so we could move it there. We could move it over a little bit in where grassy fields and pole barns are right now, kind of to the side of Tiernan Center. We could move it to McBride. It may create some other issues because of with it being in a floodplain. It might not help the water issue to move it there. So I don't know we're still looking into that, but it is an option. And then we of course have McBride work that we're going to be doing. As we went with the Parks Department. I did ask, they wanted us to winterize it, and it's not ours yet, and so I had asked them to please do that. But I sent 3 of our specialized team members in the maintenance department over to see what they did so that they knew when we reopen what it looks like. What I will say is just in that process, there was damage that occurred that we're going to have to fix. So we are preparing for that now. But it's one of those things where it was unexpected. And so now, was it things that didn't surprise us? Yeah, we're good. We knew it was probably a possibility. But as we move into that facility, it will be for the first year, it will really be field maintenance, it will be restrooms, it will be concrete work, and it will be the grandstand roof. So it won't be super flashy in the beginning. It won't be a lot of the extras yet because we need to get the parts of it that make it most playable and good for our stakeholders and our students first and foremost. So that will be where the priority lands this spring, very early, late winter, and as we move forward with McBride. Okay, and now comes the fun. So I threw out some things that are on my list that we need to just kind of think about. We could replace security cameras. We have a number on that. It's the upwards of $1.2 million if we went kind of the full thing. Our system is not broke. We are working to learn it better with retirements and changes to personnel. I will say that the system is not fully utilized right now, and so we are working on that, getting that back up to speed. But you can always make improvements to camera systems, so that's why this is on that list. You can always do it with more cameras, better options. So that's why that's here. This is super important, I know, to Mrs. Markward's heart, but it is also super important as we look ahead. Applied skills updates. We have a number of applied skills areas that just could use a lot of refreshing. We have some things we could do out in the buildings that make it just more accessible, more fun, more programmatically rewarding. That things we can think about to make it the best it can be. And those are some things that I know that we've been talking about for a while that we wanted to do. And while we're looking at options, I wanted to make sure that's on there because it is an important thing. It is a population that we see growing each and every year. And so it is something that we need to think about as we look ahead on what that will look like for the future. The other thing that we need to look at is, and this is in two places, and that's because it's a little bit more pressing, I guess. But at the Baxter building, we need a total HVAC system overhaul. Those systems haven't been touched since the 90s, and we are on borrowed time. When we do it, I know that the thing that has been most confusing to me when I was in the business office was the piecemealing. We'll do this year, and then, oh wait, we're going to come back and do this next year, but we thought that we were doing it all. And if we were going to do it all, and so making sure that we're a lot clearer with our communications on what exactly we're doing in the buildings. If we're just doing a chiller, it's just a chiller. But at Baxter, we need to do everything: boiler, chiller, VAVs, air handlers, everything, controls. That needs to be done, and pretty soon. Test, we need a roof at Test. If you think about the gym areas, the small gym is right now between that and the high school door 50, they are my rain enemies. It's just constant. And so we have fixed and we have redone so many things up there that it's getting to the point where it's very obvious. It just needs the entire roof done because they just find another place when the water is moving. So that's something that as we look ahead to roofs, those are the two that are priority as we move ahead. The other thing is that we need to just, if we're thinking about stuff, because these are really just things that I see, things that we need to think about. Cafeteria areas in our elementaries are super small. You see the food is stored outside in the hallways. They're on the big cans are on rolling dollies. We don't have storage. The kitchens are super small. If we're going to do it the best we can do, we probably need to look at options, whether it's a build out storage area, whether it's expansion to the cafeterias, whether I don't know what that, we could do it either way. There's all kinds of ways we could do it. But looking at that to make those the best they are, I just wanted to throw it out there that as we look to renovate cafeterias, because eventually that will be our goal, we are starting to put dollars into the bottom line of the food service fund. COVID was hard because we would have done this year one in bigger fashion. But as we've worked out of COVID last year, we made a substantial dent in the cash balance to start reaping the rewards of good participation and efficiencies in purchasing and processing. So with that means that we're going to renovate cafeterias. I'm excited about it. When I go to other schools to take a look at them, the students love them. They're very friendly. They look a little college-esque. It's really nice. And the kids really want to be there. And when they want to be there, they want to eat. And when they want to eat, behavior's better because those bellies are full and they're happy. And so that's something that I see as being of value beyond just the cafeteria, but out to every classroom and for every family. So I wanted to make sure that was on this list. We'll move to the next slide, and this is the heavy slide. This is where it's not pretty, nobody sees it, but it feels real good when you're done. We have substantial HVAC needs. We still have 2 buildings that are on an old piping system, and these numbers are extremely projected. I will say just based on what we have seen in the last couple projects, the market is still a little volatile. So I will say that it's not always predictable right now in this world. But that the Hibbard building and the administration building, the key is we would move to a dual temperature so you could control heating and cooling together instead of separately. There are last 2 buildings to do if we do phase 2 at Dennis. We need total HVAC system renovations at Baxter and Star. We've been out to both those buildings at least twice a week on a regular basis since I've gone over and been at Warner. And I'm sure that it's not been any different for a long time. That will cost approximately between $3 and $4 million as well, based on the current kind of map of what we're seeing. Boilers, we need boilers at the administration building, Charles and Vale. We also need controls desperately at Crestdale, some additional controls. It was when we did the Crestdale HVAC work, controls were not a large part of that plan, and it has caused us some headaches. And so just knowing that we need to finish that work is something that we need to consider in the very near future. Okay, so we are going to talk about Hibbard for a hot minute. And this is simply because as we look to plan STEAM and Imagination Labs and what that looks like, there's some things about Hibbard that are going to need to be done in order to finish that work the best it can be. And I'm simply letting you know that the costs are rising. So our initial thoughts in how much it was going to take to do everything that needs to be done to put that lab in that pool area. Originally, it's been anywhere from $1.5 to $4 million. We need substantial HVAC work in there. That alone will cost possibly that much. We have drainage issues that is creating additional water problems in the facade that moves into that gym and pool area. That is actually in this presentation. You saw it earlier. We're thinking $500,000 or more. At that point in time, I want to make the playground that's in the upper area a little bit more accessible to all of our students. So right now, if you go there, you're going to see wood slats of steps, looking at a ramp, maybe making it a little bit easier to get to for every student in that building to get up there. But we have work to do at Hibbard. And so it's something that as we look at cost analysis, we need to think about it. Do we want to fix things, or do we want to look at building? We've not really ever talked about it. And maybe we're at the point with some of our buildings being as old as they are, maybe we need to look at different things. All of that is just something we have to talk about. I'm not saying we have to make any decision one way or another in any quick fashion, but if we are looking at substantial numbers like we're looking at, just in HVAC alone, I mean, we're talking about half of building a brand new building for like 3 or 4 buildings. So it's just, I'm just tossing it out there for you to just think about. And with that, I wanted to just give you just some brief knowledge on, you know, what we're standing on with the current age of our buildings. We have 3 buildings that are 100 years old or older. One more is going to turn 100 in 2029. That's a substantial percentage above average throughout the state in one district. They're beautiful, but they require a lot of maintenance to do that. So RHS, Dennis, Test, and Fairview were all built in the 1920s. Baxter, Charles, Crestdale, Starvale, and Westview were built from 1950 through the 1960s. Hibbard and the administration building were built in the 70s, and the bus garage was built in 1980. That's a long time. We don't have very new buildings, and there's just a lot to consider. So I did ask, and this is 100% his help. Mr. McCurdy has worked in building new schools very recently. And so I just wanted to know, what's the general amount per square foot if we're looking at building something new? Because I can't have a real conversation without knowing a little bit about what that means. And so he's provided that to us. It's about $300 per square foot to $400 per square foot. And you can see elementary is a little different than middle. High school goes up from there because you have very custom programming, especially in career center areas, that just increase that cost. So that's just so that we know. And then if you refer to your facility plan, the square footages of all of our buildings is in that plan. So you have that if you want to play around with it. If you're a numbers guru, you can work those numbers up. But it's something that we just probably need to at least know. Whether we don't have to do anything different. We can just continue to modify based on what we have. But it is something that I did want you to at least be aware of. If you can move to the next slide, Alex. I'm going to throw some, we've talked about it here. We're just going to talk about it. So I provided some information on the Everett building. To repair, we're nearing the $8 to $10 million mark. To rebuild, we're looking at 10 to 14. Rebuilding with the same type of format. So same amount of student, housing, numbers, things like that. That's very preliminary, just so you know. And that doesn't mean all bells and whistles. So as you add bells and whistles, costs go up. But that's a baseline for you to consider. Looking at exterior, interior signage throughout the district, just making things look a little prettier, making things flow a little bit from the outside. Where are the shipments, deliveries, where do they go? Where is our bus lane? Where is our car rider drop off? That's what we kind of mean by exterior. Interior is looking at things like what you see at Dennis. It's like maybe revamping NCC information over in Tiernan, just making all of our buildings look a little friendlier and welcoming to students. School choice is real, and we talk about it every week, but warming those up and making them look exciting to be in. That's just something we talked about at Cabinet. I threw out, and this is so rough, like I did not talk to Mr. McCurdy about this, so these are not his numbers, but I kind of went with some things that I had seen. I kind of did some research. And then Mr. Feller had actually had this in his district, so we kind of played with some things. But an athletic field house, what are we looking at for that? You've talked about it a couple of times. I've heard it from you. Just wanted to kind of throw some stuff out there. All of that depends on what you have in it and what kind of facility you build. That's probably looking at more of a pole barn style, not fancy brick, but I just threw it on there. Then just knowing interior design renovations, Valestar and Charles are pretty dated. Knowing that we want to look at them soon for just making them refreshed. And then we need some work to revamp restrooms at all buildings. I know a couple of you have talked with me about that because when we did the bathroom at the high school, the honors hall restroom, like it changed the game. The kids, it's beautiful. And knowing that we could do that even more often would be really great. It's not a cheap undertaking. But it's something that we probably would like to look at as we plan ahead for some routine needs moving forward. So these are just ideas. I'm just throwing them out there for discussion, for things as we look ahead, because what we're going to have to do, funding is going to be the hard part, and we have to decide where we want to go with that. This cannot be done in an operations budget alone. It's just not. We lose way too much to circuit breaker. We don't get those funds the way that we used to. Even with growth quotient, you can't fund these needs with that alone. Not without it taking a really long time. So just knowing that that's, there and out there, I just wanted to throw it to you to talk about. We haven't had a facility conversation in a really long time. So just wanted to bring it to you to bat around. So that's what I have.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Scott. Mrs. Bowles.
So
Just one comment before you move on. There were just a couple items I thought may have been missing. When we did the school restructure test in Dennis, the board made a commitment to the public, I thought, to bring in GoTech shop classes, and that was going to be a significant expense. I don't know where we're at with that, but that was on the table for a long time, and I think all we've done is bring like exploratory language, which was
Do
minimal.
you know when that was put in writing? I'll go back and look because
And that may not be the will of the board anymore. I'm just saying that.
But do you remember about when? Because I just have to
I know
look
for
for that.
sure, a retreat at your house about a year and a half ago.
We talked about
so
the
it would have
retreats,
been.
but we
But
didn't
before
talk
we
about it all,
switched those
even,
buildings.
even when
Right.
we with Fannie and Howie working with them, we talked and shifted the focus of bringing some of the hands-on classes back. So I do remember that, John.
And I don't know where we're at with that. I just think it should be in the space.
What we'll do is we'll go back to I know that was before my time in the seat.
I mean, that was before we made the switch.
I don't know that it was ever promised, but I do know it was talked about heavily.
I think it was
That
talked
our
about in
goal.
public.
That was our goal, was to bring it back. I don't know that we've ever said we are.
Yeah, I don't know that. Yeah,
But
well, yeah, you never say yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I know we discussed it, and obviously you know where I stand with that.
Well,
No.
and there was consensus at the time, and I think it's been brought up several times, and each time there has been consensus, so that was prior to the two of you guys being on here.
So what we can do, we can add that to options that we talk about, like for future planning, because
know
I'm
if
sorry,
we're
but
still
I
there.
was not aware of that, and so we would have to think through that and what it looks like and how to be feasible.
But the thought was the traditional shop classes, home ec, wood shop. I think language was in the conversation.
Okay.
And so I don't know that we're still there.
Yeah, you weren't in your current position.
But
we understand that.
Well,
I would just hate for us
Right, but I mean, I would like to go look at if we talked about it in public to at least know what that was talked about, so we can kind of plan, or it's just so that we can kind of map whatever we need to map, if you need numbers or if you need options, things like that. So just understanding that that's something we want to look at.
So it's been so long ago, the numbers would be good if we did more with the rise of costs.
I'm not sure when we did the switch.
We could have told you it was
4
gonna
years.
take $2 million, but if that was 8 years ago, it's gonna be
Right.
7 now. I mean,
Okay.
it's crazy.
Yeah, we can explore that.
I remember
Yeah, that's why we picked the dentist, because it had more physical room, so it gave us more options for those type of things.
I remember the conversation on it, and it wasn't just one time. And it was several times based upon the real world experiences that people have lost over the last 20, 30 years when you don't have the hands-on shop classes, who does home economics anymore. But the things that were taught then that really come to be of great value today in just the day-to-day lives of people that most people don't even know how to do. How many people can sew? That's just one thing. But I mean, really, those hand-to-hand things were what we discussed, and the value of someone going into a shop class or home economics or something like that, because as we know, every student is not going to go to college, but these are skills, and these are lifelong skills that we may have undervalued over the last 30 years, but really need to be brought back into existence.
The second one was, there's been a lot of conversation about solar, and if there's others, I think that would be worth exploring. And then the third one was, there's been a lot of conversation on and off about Tiernan bathrooms, locker rooms, and I don't know where that is. I didn't see any reference to those things. So that's all I had.
Any other
Mrs. Bowles?
questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, any other questions from the
No,
board? Things
I'll
that,
echo what John said. We've talked about the Terrace Center locker rooms and bathrooms quite often. That was a thought at the time after we did the bleachers and everything, so we're going to start looking at upgrading the facilities as far as the locker rooms and stuff.
So remember, what I'm curious, and I know Mr. Stoltz had referenced it, if we were to go back and.
I can't give you an exact date. I mean,
If that ballpark around the bleachers, we'll try, if
yeah,
there
I mean,
has.
it's a good reference point,
If
but
there
I
has
mean,
been, yeah.
we've talked about it ever since we had the community meetings and everything when we were redistricting, and talking about the potential $80 million renovation of the high school and,
The bond
that
funds
was
are limited to
6
$5
years
million
ago.
that we could spend, and we tried to spread that out as best we could. I
Yeah.
mean, that's when we did the bus garage, we did the bleachers. And so there was some thought that, you know, additional funds, I mean, that would be something we would look at, I think.
But within that general ballpark, we can go back and we'll find it.
Yeah.
Confident we'll find it and we'll
It was around the first, that $5 million bond issuance.
The lockers I have found as being part of conversations, and funds just didn't allow to finish it.
Right.
So that part, yeah.
Yeah, but that $5 million bond issuance would be a good reference point to start looking at.
It was even,
Yep.
it's more than just that,
Right.
from what I can find, yeah.
I'm just talking about what we were doing.
Timeline.
Thank you. Mrs. Bolzer?
Okay. So with all of those things, and obviously we have been, I think, trying to do those within the operations fund or other miscellaneous grants. I know that we've tried to do a lot and absorb a lot within the ESSER grants. Those are obviously either have expired or are expiring. So we also began looking at the utilization of our current funds and what other capacities that we may have to diversify a little bit more. And obviously that obviously makes you look at debt resources. When we started doing comparatives, we are, if not the lowest, we are in the ballpark to be the lowest debt rate in the state of Indiana. While on one hand that's wonderful, on the other, though, it's possibly we're not utilizing the resources available to us that we could be, and I think we keep falling possibly further and further behind as we look at that long list, and it is growing. So with that, I reached out, as you guys know, to the All-Star team, Mr. Elizondo, who is joining us virtually, as well as Mrs. Jane Herndon, who is in person, and Jim Elizondo is with Stifle, and Jane Herndon is with Ice Miller. We've used them both, I think, here in the past. I've worked very closely with them in my previous ventures, and have had quite a few very successful projects with them. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over. Mr. Elizondo has a slide deck for you, and he is here, and I can see him. But we're going to show you the slides just so the public can see the slides, but we'll be able, I think, to hear him. I'm hopeful. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Elizondo. Hang on just a second, Jeb. We're going to make sure we can hear you. And while we're waiting on the sound to come on, I did just reach out to a couple good close friends that just completed some field houses around the state, and there are obviously different variable levels that you can construct just to show you. But since we had recently done one of those projects too, they just completed at $5 million for the cost for those two. So there are varying levels of what you can do. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. Okay, can you hear us okay, Jim? I think he can because his lips started moving. And now he's laughing at us. And I may be able to turn him on through my laptop.
Mr. Elizondo, how about now?
Here he is.
Okay,
Oh, there he is. We're good.
Now do we have me?
Yes, we do, Mr. Elizondo.
Perfect. Well, am I speaking loud enough that you can hear me?
I
Yes.
think we're good, yes.
Okay, well, I'm Jim Elizondo. I've been doing this since 1986, but I've been based in the Fort Wayne office where I think you've worked with some other of my colleagues in the Indianapolis office. So nice to meet you all. I was asked to kind of take a look and hopefully provide you with some tools as you try to address the comprehensive study that Karen has just provided you with needs for the school district. So what I'd like to do is kind of look at your debt service fund and what options bonds might have as a way to help fund these needs and move some of these needs away from your operations fund into your debt service fund to, again, take care of current needs, future needs, but also ultimately free up operations funds for other uses rather than just straight capital needs. If everybody's ready, I think we can go to the next slide.
And this slide deck is in your presentation too, and it's available for public comment.
So we can go to the next slide. I want to start with, this is just a summary of your outstanding debt service, and what you'll see there is your existing debt starts to pay off noticeably in 2027 and then pays off completely in 2029. So that is our basis for the debt service fund, and what I want to look at is various options that kind of aren't tied to any specific project, but are tied to maybe providing a matrices for you to look at as you decide what projects you want to tackle. So if we go to the next slide, the first place I want to start is with the idea of what if we were to borrow $10 million this next spring and repay it over 15 years. In Indiana, we can repay debt 20 years. I started with the more conservative approach of what if we do show a 15-year repayment. A 20-year repayment would increase the total cost over the life of the repayment, but would give a little more flexibility in the future. But let's start with the 10-year repayment. That would show us that we could fund $10 million borrowing with a tax increase for 2 years of approximately 3 3/4 cents per $100 of assessed value. If we go to the next slide, I tried to equate that to what that might cost to various homeowners in your school district. In Richmond, Richmond, you have a circuit breaker that impacts homes at approximately $80,000 or higher. So if you have a home in Richmond with a gross assessed value of $80,000 or higher, you are already hitting the tax caps. And so any new project or any new debt would be a no increase to that homeowner's tax rate. However, at $79,000, you are subject to an increase, and so I'm just using that as a base to say, well, approximately on that $79,000 home, the $3.75 equates to $7.16 per year increase for those 2 years to fund a $10 million borrow. If you're already at circuit breaker in Richmond, then no increase would occur to your tax bill, and the circuit breaker for the district would increase slightly because of that. Looking outside of Richmond and your other incorporated areas into your townships, the township circuit breaker levels are higher, and so for that I use the median school district home as provided by the U.S. Census in 22, which is 109,500. So again, I'm just picking a spot to estimate a tax impact. So in your townships, that median home would cost approximately $14.60 per year for those 2 years. Before I go on, are there any questions on kind of how I'm showing just an estimate of that impact for those 2 years, and then you see that it drops in my model after that?
Good.
Think we're good. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, if we go to the next slide. Assuming a $10 million borrowing next spring, that would leave us room, or leave you room, with approximately $24.5 million worth of capacity, starting as early as a year from now, up to 2 years for additional needs. My assumptions here are no AV growth, so I'm trying to be conservative there. If you have more AV growth, that would provide more capacity, or if you were to borrow for 20 years, you would get more capacity. But sticking with that 15-year theme, this slide tries to show you that you can borrow the $10 million, have the slight tax increase, and then still provide flexibility for approximately $25 million worth of other needs, starting as early as a year to 2 out from now. Okay. Next, if we go to the next slide, I just move up in our matrices and I look at what does this look like for a $15 million bond issue. So in this case, your $15 bond issue would allow you to tackle more of the needs that Karen presented. In this case, that tax increase moves to 4 3/4 cents per $100 of assessed value, or $9 annual increase for the non-circuit breaker home in Richmond, 0 increase for the circuit breaker homes in Richmond, and approximately 18.5 cents for the median district home in the township. Okay? And you'll find a theme here. Each of these models is going to kind of follow the same thought process. Here, if we borrow $15 million this spring, leaves us roughly $21.25 million within a 15-year new borrowing capacity starting a year to 2 years from now. Next slide.
Sorry, can we, just for the public that's watching, that are just tuning into this, we've been fortunate enough around here to be able to understand what you're talking about. What's the circuit breaker mean for people that are watching?
Yes, so basically homesteads, homes that are your primary homestead have what we call a 1% circuit breaker cap. So if you have a gross assessed value home of $100,000, your maximum tax bill cannot exceed 1% of that gross assessed value. So for simplicity, if we have that $100,000 home, your tax bill cannot exceed $1,000. Now, we then calculate the tax bills of each of your underlying taxing districts. That includes you, the county, townships, fire, libraries, all of those components that fit in the tax rate, and a tax rate is generated. If that tax rate is high enough, as an example, let's say that $100,000 home has a tax bill calculated at $1,500, we know the maximum bill that's payable under circuit breaker is $1,000, but the tax bill requires $1,500. That $500 is not collected from the homeowner. The homeowner's bill is capped, but the underlying taxing districts required that extra $500. So what happens is that $500 is then shorted to the taxing district. So you as a school district would receive a little less than what you had asked for, The township would receive less, the county, and so on. To the extent that that tax bill calculated, and that's the example of the townships, maybe that $100,000 home only has a tax bill of $900, then the tax bill would be $900, not the $1,000 cap, and then any increase until you get to that 1,000 would be collectible. And so that's why we did this delineation between various taxpayers of how much they would be paid. But everybody has experienced that tax gap, and if you were to look at your tax bill, if you are receiving a tax gap, your tax bill will have an item that a line item that shows how much your savings due to the tax gap. In effect, from a taxpayer standpoint, that is a savings, and anything, and once you're at that tax cap, any increase in the tax rate will not impact you as a homeowner, but it does impact you as a municipality. So looking at it from the other side as a school district or the county, etc., you have a tax circuit breaker shortfall, and that's the accumulation of all of these individual tax bills that are capped out by circuit breaker tax caps. You then receive that shortfall, which you as a school district have offset through reductions in your operations and other school funds to make your budget balanced. Does that help?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. I know people are gonna be trying to watch this and be like, what in the world is he talking about? So.
And if I can real quickly interject too, our total circuit breaker loss for the district is 3.4 million in 2023, which is approximately 29% of our operations levy, because you realize it in the operations fund. You collect 100% of your debt service. It's a protected tax rate. So that is about 29% of our overall levy, which is a levy is what you need to bring in, right? So we obviously take into consideration that loss. And the only other thing I would also interject is there is a variable to it, only in that if the gross assessed value increases from year to year, that percentage obviously will adjust with that gross assessed value. That is a result of the market, the real estate market. The trending analysis is a year behind, so that is a variable that could that's outside of our control.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem at all, and please interrupt as you have other questions. I believe the slide that's in front of you now assumes a $20 million borrowing, and you see that moves us to approximately the 6-cent increase, the $11.5 increase per year for Richmond, and a $23.4 increase to the township estimate. If we move to the next slide, that leaves us approximately 18.75 million of future capacity. I didn't see that slide change on the screen. Are you there? I just can't see it.
Yes, we're good.
Perfect. I think my light yellow is not real good for me to see, so I apologize. Next slide takes a bigger jump, and I move up to, well, what does it take if you fund 30 million now? And you see that still keeps us at about a little under 10 cents, or roughly 9 cents per $100 of assessed value, or roughly $17.3 per year, and then $35.3 per year. But what you'll see is instead of the 2 years, and where we have a drop in 27 and 29, that drop becomes much lower because we're really filling up those remaining 13 years with debt. And that's noticeable when we go to the next slide, that leaves us approximately $10 million in capacity if we were to stick within that tax rate and within 15 years. If you were to go to 20 years on some future debt, you might be up to the 14 million range. But you can see this is an option that addresses more needs now and then counts on not as many needs in the future, or any needs in the future greater than this may be subject to a tax increase, or if your assessed value grows, creating more additional capacity down the road. Okay, and then I want to summarize with two tables that I know Jamie mentioned in passing earlier. The first is comparing your total school rates with some nearby school districts. And you're represented on the far right at that just under 75 cents level. So that is your current rate. If we were to add the 4 cents or 3 cents for my $10 million option, that keeps you still at the lowest. If we were to add the 9 cents off the $30 million project, that may bump you up a couple spots, but you're still showing up as one of the lower tax rates. Now, this table does not assume to address any changes that any of these other school districts are contemplating or have taken since the 2023 budget. But as of 2023, these are their certified budgets. And then the final page looks just specifically to debt service. And debt service, you are noticeably lower than many of these peers. And under that scenario, every option I showed you still keeps you in that low spot. Again, the caveat is that we haven't reflected what any of these other districts might have done or are contemplating. That's all I have. My goal was hopefully to let you know that as you look through your needs and address what direction you're working toward in capital needs and managing your operational expenses, that you do have some flexibility within the bond market to move some of that obligation to your debt service fund. And as we work through this, obviously JB and Karen can have us update any of these numbers with more specific information as you have questions and make some progress down this road. Any questions?
I got a quick question. So just to clarify, the operations fund levy would still remain the same. The debt service would then ride along the side of it. So the impact to the operation fund would be the tax caps. And is there any forecasting of if we issue no additional debt or have no additional debt issuance, what our tax cap number would be? We're at about 3.5 million currently. What would that be? And then just to go to the other extreme, if we look at if we were to issue a $30 million debt issuance in that, 27, 29 year, what would our tax cap number be?
That, I'll give a brief summary and then I'll, Jamie, let you continue on that because you're well versed in this. But basically, to have a true estimate of your tax cap impact from any of these projects or doing none of the projects, that is a parcel by parcel study that has to be done. And there are firms that do that. It can do that fairly quickly and help you with that. The idea that if you were to do nothing, your debt service rate, as I showed on the first slide, is scheduled to go to zero in a few years. So that would provide some natural relief to your tax rate and circuit breakers based on tax rate. Now that caveat is that none of your other taxing districts take that what they raise their rate to offset what you drop.
Correct.
But the idea is that if that were to come down that would impact that. From an operations stand, your operations fund levy is set by the maximum gross quotient and is set at that level. What these projects would do by moving money to debt service, they would free up obligations within your operations fund, which then would provide you more internal money to use to either offset circuit breaker or to increase programs or use for other things rather than capital needs.
Right.
But if you were to go the 30 million route and raise your tax rate, that would increase circuit breaker loss, which then has to be figured into that budgeting process of how much net operations fund am I gaining by taking $30 million worth of needs out of operations, but having a little more circuit breaker put in there. And those are all things that I think Jamie can address, and you as an administration and board will have to deal with as you balance these needs and solutions financially as you move forward.
But the operations levy stays at the same number, which is a huge deal. And none of debt issuances gets recouped from TIF funds. So I assume Jamie's going to discuss maybe an option or two that would look at TIF funds and be able to recoup some of those dollars that have been lost, especially in Richmond with our super TIF at a great clip for the last, 25, 30 years or better. So.
I think that's a great point. To speak to Jim's term he used is that balance. You try to find that balance, right? Not the tipping point with a lot of these. We did that, if you remember, when we looked at the excess levy for the transportation. You try to find that balance where you're collecting a net revenue source in addition, not going to lose all of it to the circuit breaker caps. Same thing that's relative to this debt issuance. You try to find that balance to that need so that you can offset those resources within the operations fund and utilize them, like Jim said, for other programming or non-capital needs. I would speak to the TIF also. These funds are outside of that TIF. There are mechanisms that you can capture some of that TIF. And I think that that's important to also look at, as I told you from the beginning or the onset and coming into this position. I think one of the things that we have to look at is diversifying our resources that are coming in. This is one method to diversify that I think is very needed. And as you can see from that chart, we're last. And I think what we're being able to provide has reflected in some ways. As much as we try and do the very best that we can, we are doing it with a very limited resource for a very wide-spanned campus and the needs for aging buildings. So there are mechanisms that you can also utilize for a different types of debt issuances that can tax into those TIF funds. It is, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, it's a referendum. Yeah, if you go to referendum, you can obligate those funds and capture some of the TIF revenue. So that is something, because those TIF funds are pulled away from the entities, and we still have to provide those increasing services and needs for those areas. So that is something too, an operating referendum. And originally in talking to Stifle and Jim and his team, we are the a perfect case for an operating referendum. I think obviously you can see as that debt comes off, that is something to explore and to be ahead of that debt falling off. Is, do we at that time look at an operating referendum? Because at that point you would really lower the tax rate. Even if you reissue that same amount, you would lower that tax rate because you're spreading it out across more assessed value, and you would have an increase in that assessed value then. So that's something I think that we're going to continue to provide you with those options. I think that that's what I heard is the availability of having the options. So we had a full, complete, hey, here's more of the extensive needs throughout the corporation that we're trying to fund within such a small amount of funds. Here's some additional funds that has such a limited impact on our homeowners and our community. Will we lose circuit breaker additional funds? Yes, we will. Will the net funds available in the operations be greater? Yes, they will, because you're pulling out, and that's finding that balance level, you're pulling out more of the need in the capital aspect in the operations to have that net gain there so that you can be a little bit more flexible with it. So I think that kind of will throw me into what Mrs. Herndon is here to present. And she's going to talk about what our limitations are as we provide you these wonderful options. There are some limitations in trying to keep it a non-control project, and as well as looking at the timeline as far as when we need to start receiving those funds to be able to get some of these projects moving.
Because you need more paper. Thank you all very much. I appreciate being here. Some of you, I think, are familiar faces. It's been a few years. We work with the district, as you heard, as bond counsel. That's a specialized counsel. Really, this is all I do every day. So when Mr. Cross was talking about all those other things in the educational legal world, I know nothing about them. This is all I do is bonds and frankly referendum work. So thank you for having me. I'm going to start with the slide up here on the screen and in your packet. So you heard about your list of needs, short-term, long-term needs. You heard from Mr. Elizondo, potential options with regard to what you may or may not be able to afford and how those might be structured. We now want to talk about legal steps and specifically taxpayer voter opportunities with regard to stopping projects or sending them to more process. I will say every project that you would fund with bonds would require public hearing, would require notices in the newspaper, would require action of this board at public meetings. So no matter what option we talk about here, there is lots of public knowledge and ability to come to meetings and know about the projects. So when we get into what legal steps apply, one of the things we have to look at is the total project cost. So not just what are you borrowing, but if you were to take cash and put it towards a project, it is the total project cost that we need to identify. Here's a slide that shows you what types of costs that we're including when we say total project cost. So it's not just the hard construction to put the roof on, it's all the costs. Going on then to the next page, for Richmond in 2024, under the statute, first row there, if a total project cost was $6,354,665 or less, then we call it a non-controlled project, meaning the taxpayers, the voters, do not have a formal way to stop the project except to come to public hearings to address their concerns to the board. The second row then would be a project with a cost of more than that, up to the $19,051,000 number. In that level of a project, you would be subject to the possibility of 500 voters or taxpayers filing a petition requesting a petition remonstrance race, basically a battle of petitions. In that second row I was describing, it's called a controlled project, meaning voters and taxpayers have some ability to control whether you do the project or not. In that situation, you would hold 2 public hearings. You would establish the maximum amount of the project, and then a notice would go into the newspaper starting a 30-day period in which that 500 voter taxpayer petition could be circulated requesting that process. If you got through that 30-day period and nobody filed a petition, then you would move on to the next legal steps.
The third row there then is also a controlled project, but it's one that's over 19 million. At that point, same 2 hearings, same notice in the newspaper, but now those 500 voters or taxpayers are requesting a referendum. If you got through that 30-day period with no petition, you would not have to hold a referendum. To your question though, the only way to get tax rate outside the caps is to run and win an either capital referendum, meaning for projects, or, as you heard from Jamie, an operations referendum, which typically is used more for actually paying to operate your facilities or to pay teachers and things like that. So I'll stop there. Any questions on that part?
Jason, could you at least address the concept that the numbers you're talking about there are relating to projects, but project does not equate to.
Next slide.
Next slide, never mind.
She's going to define the asterisks for you now, because you saw the asterisks on those amounts. She's going to define that.
So we didn't practice this, but so the question that you might be asking is, what is a project? And the statute actually doesn't define it. Through the Department of Local Government Finance, a state agency, they have the power to evaluate whether a unit of government has divided a project to avoid this petition remonstrance or this referendum process. And through their past findings, we know that we look at the facts and circumstances of a project. We look at, is it a different site? In other words, could you do an elementary roof and is that separate from a middle school HVAC system? Could you do one and never do the other one? Or are you doing half of an HVAC system in a building that's really not functional until you come back next year and do the second half? That would not be an individual project. We might look at location, so separate buildings, could be source of funds, could be timing, and could be how are you contracting for them. So let me give you another example. We know the DLGF has concerns about a roofing project that's done at multiple buildings. Each building maybe is below that 6 million number, but when you look at the roofing contract as a whole, it puts you over that 6 million. We know that's something that the DLGF has concerns with. I will tell you, this is a little bit of an art with some science thrown in. It is not completely black and white. This district, though, has a history, has previously done separate non-controlled projects, so it's not unheard of. And we would want to, as you start to identify your priorities, we then would take a look at those priorities and determine how much are we spending at this middle school? How much are we spending at the high school? What kind of work is being done? So it is possible, as you look at those, that you might come to a place that you have multiple non-controlled projects. The statute says, and the DLGF has said, that you can fund multiple non-controlled projects in one bond issue, so there is some efficiencies there. Now you'll see in the slide here, I do note that it takes one taxpayer or citizen to contact that state agency and raise concerns if they believe a school board has divided projects to avoid giving the community a say. So that is something to be concerned about or consider as we're looking at your various projects. The last slide, which I don't know that I included there, but I included in here, sorry about that, I said to add this in, is a chart showing you how that those thresholds have grown over time and how they will continue to grow. So you see in 2024, we're talking about that 6,350,000 number. If the law doesn't change, that number will grow next year to 6,540,000 and can grow the following year to 6,007,000. So there is right now some ability for that non-controlled threshold to grow, just so you know as you're looking at your various projects. Questions on all that?
One of the things I'll add in relation to that and talking about the control projects, one of the things that we often do to be able to make sure that we minimize the risk of getting into a controlled, if you're trying to stay in a non-controlled setting, is to really, I almost call it like a matrix, a graph that lists all of our sites and all of the projects, you know, the very distinct projects. So as Karen brought me her facility and needs assessment, I then started bracketing those and making sure that you stay pretty conservative and making sure that you're not overlapping anything so that you can make sure you're staying in that non-controlled. So in just making sure that those are bucketed as far as, you know, if it's a roofing project, that's going to be different than the HVAC project, or anything that's ground improvement compared to inside facility improvement. And as you grid those and separate those and then do so by building, you know, like right now I'm looking at my grid for just some of the things that Karen provided and said, okay, could we do a 20 million and keep it controlled? Can we do a 15 million as Jim provided you those different options? Because I think after you see the very limited impact to that tax rate, we have hopefully some additional options. So, you know, in looking at it, I just plugged in with some of the things that she showed a 14.2 and some of the costs, and obviously she showed that it could continue to grow to 20 million. So I've been able to matrix that and an approach. Obviously you can't control that, as Jane mentioned, you just try to limit that. And so we do have a grid for that 20 million. If you, with those options provided, say, hey, you know, there's 30, 40, 50 million dollars worth of projects, can we keep 15, 20 million of it non-controlled? There is a mechanism to do that. The more you inch up though, the more we're saying probably would be better to say, hey, let's just do these now. You'll have some ability to come back in a couple of years. If you have another 20 million at that time, you'll have that capacity as others fall off. And then at that point, you could really work to continue to stabilize that rate at that point.
Last thing, and I'll go fairly quickly through this, I promise. I know you guys have had a lot on your agenda tonight already. The timetable here. So if you were to conclude that you were interested in funding a non-controlled project or perhaps multiple non-controlled projects, let's focus on the highlight in red because that's school board action. You could come back at your January 24th meeting, and at that point, if you had considered your projects, narrowed those down and decided on what kind of dollar amount per project and then how much total you would be interested in moving forward, at that point, the board would make a decision that they're ready to move forward with legal steps. You then would come back at your February 14th meeting and you would hold a hearing on those projects. There would be financial information provided, and that would all be maximum financial terms. The board keeps control. You could always lower the amounts to be borrowed or the project size. You just couldn't go up without starting that process over again. Various notices in the newspaper. This project would be a lease financing. This district has done lease financings before. The form of the lease would be approved at a February board meeting, and then top of page 3, we come back with another public hearing in April on the lease. So as you can see, there are quite a few board meetings, hearings, and I didn't even touch on notices. There's a lot of that in the newspaper. This would allow you then to borrow the money sometime mid-April, and you would have cash in the bank then in May. So just an overview, obviously, every month that it gets moved back, all the timetable gets moved back, that's perfectly fine. We just wanted to give you a feel for what the steps would look.
And I would also say May is that sweet spot, because you look at summer projects, that's really when you can get in and make the biggest changes, if you're, especially if you're renovating inside and trying to have the least impact to the students and staff. You try to really try to experience as much of that through the summer. And to Jane's point, this evening, obviously nothing is actionable at this point, but it's directional. We need some sense of what that capacity level is comfort with. Oh, yeah, no,
I was gonna go sit down.
no, do you have any questions, I should say, for Jane before she does sit down?
I'm here if you need it.
Okay. So we're looking for that, you know, you see the needs, you see the funding mechanisms. Now, in order to really tie down to Brad and Pete's question as far as what does that circuit breaker impact mean, and what does, well, there's so many options that we're providing. It really is dependent on what that ceiling of comfort could be. If it's 30 million, then we'll come back and say, you know, that's a not to exceed amount. The board has, like Jane mentioned, the control to lower it as you move forward. But then we can really start to zero in on what additional studies and analysis, because we've expanded them to this point to provide you those options. But as we narrow that ceiling down, and that will give us the direction to publish that notice, an amount not to exceed. It'll give us the ability to say, hey, this is what it would do to our operations fund. So you would know that additional net loss.
And this goes just to piggyback. I want to thank not only yourself, Mr. Scout, Mr. El Zondo, Attorney Hendren, Mr. Herndon, I'm sorry. Jane, I should know better. Mr. McCurdy, as well as Attorney Coulson. And one of the things that, when you're looking at Mrs. Scout's needs-based assessment of where we are, and as Mrs. Scout alluded to earlier, hearing, since I've been in this seat, the multitude of ideas that I think our trustees have had, not only this board, but also previous boards before. One of the things that I charged them all with was, hey, let's share the whole kit and caboodle, as they say in the South, and provide as many options as possible, so as to afford our board of trustees an opportunity to arrive at not necessarily a decision, but at least provide such guidance as Mrs. Bowles was just alluding to. So.
And then we would also take, based off of that guidance or direction from this evening on that ceiling, I think Karen would go back and say, with that allowable amount and hearing the input from this evening, even put that priority list together of what that looks like, what we can fund, and then have some contingencies built into that. We obviously, as Jane presented, also plan for the soft costs, the cost of issuance. Those are obviously already embedded. We do allow a contingency and then have other priorities if something came in under budget. So that's the direction that we would begin to go with that timeline that Jane presented.
So when I add up, just rough adding up the blue items, that's 10.5 without adding in Hibbard or some of the other things you don't have numbers on. Is that correct?
You probably didn't add in the HVAC stuff either,
Okay.
the per building, because there's 3 to 4 million at each building of
Okay.
the very at the
Oh,
end.
I see that. No, I didn't.
Yeah,
So
it gets a little bigger than that.
Okay, so
If we
that's
want to do all the blue.
yeah, okay. I'm just trying to get it
But
right.
yes, if
Yeah.
I mean, you can go all different ways with
That's
it. Yes.
18 million without Hibbard and without tennis courts, McBride, and turf. 18. Okay.
I really think the meaningful document to help you kind of see all the variables would be Jamie's matrix sheet, or as you call it, her spreadsheet, that not only itemizes what you're going to do per building, but also attempts to total what you're doing per trade or per type of work, and
Right.
and recognizing that you could impact, the greater the issue, you could be impacting the total that might go to a trade, even if you add different buildings. So.
Sure.
And that's where right now it's totals. We've kind of worked grand totals per type because we needed guidance from you on like which of these items do you definitely want to say like, yeah, we think we need to move in this way, because it'll depend. Like, I mean, we've kind of batted around 2 different ways already, that the way to bucket. And so knowing that right now we started with totals so that it was faster for us. I think as we looked at just control versus non-controlled, but then you have to define that even more. And so it's just knowing what that means to you and what you feel is the most important.
And I think
part
the
of it.
minimum, we talk about that balance. I think you have, the minimum to be able to move is 10 million. If you're looking for any of that,
What's the time frame on you spend the money for projects? Because the labor shortage is huge, and trying to find contractors to come in here and do it all at once. So you're not going to be able to get this all done in a year.
Yeah.
So I mean, what kind of
3 years?
3 years,
3 years
that
and
has to be completed or started?
No, ideally you'd want to be able to say that you finished in 3 years. That is not a hard and fast rule, but we want you to reasonably say that you expect to be done in 3 years.
Okay, because I mean, that type of amount, just trying to find the personnel and the time, because you can't do it all in one summer because there's just not enough contractors around.
And what I will say is we have substantial projects underway next summer with ESSER closing already. So we do have things going next summer. It's just a matter of how to time everything appropriately to meet all of those.
To your point,
needs.
Brad, I will say too that, that was concerning me with the ESSER, because you have to encumber the funds by next year and then you have to expend them just 3 months later. Well, we're saying with the shortages in labor and the delays in equipment, we want to make sure we're going to get reimbursed through the ESSER funds. And in fact, several of us went last week, was it? Seems
Last Thursday.
okay. To a federal grants conference, and that was something that was definitely brought up, and they're even embedding some waivers because they want to make sure that we can get our reimbursements because of those delays. So. But I think we would definitely need to have prepared to have cash, or at least availability by around that May timeframe. Originally we were looking at April. You see the revised schedule here. But with that said, and that's because I think Karen has already started trying to get ahead to get on the calendar. And that's why I brought last month the resolution to reimburse so that if we do utilize some cash reserves, we have the mechanism to repay ourselves if it's on our matrix for projects.
And I guess my question, when you look at the list of projects, what is the capacity within the 3-year period? And if you take, you're not going to be able to take all the HVAC, you're not going to be able to take all the roof projects, but if you take a few of each, then
Right, and I think that's where Mr. Elizondo had talked about like stacking debt or staggering it, however
Correct.
you want to say
So
it.
whether
So
you're
we don't
doing-
have to take a large amount right now. We could take enough to do substantial projects over the 3 years and do a little at a time, knowing that the end result is this total. And I think that's why he wanted to show capacity and like general totals across the board, because we would have to, and we've talked about this before in years past, intentional planning so that maybe you're taking debt issuance this year and then you're going to take it again in a year and a half in order to keep all of those things happening so that you can hit your 3-year windows for work.
Right.
And that's where he showed the totals, but that's how that could work if, like you said, we have issues getting the work done in the amount of time. I think that also.
And is there any advantage to taking, instead of a 15-year approach, a shorter term approach, so that we
I think
are using more of our debt capacity within that 27, 28, 29, especially when the rest of our debt falls off, and then as our capacity to take on some of those other projects, we can then stagger.
I think what you look at is what you're financing and the needs you're financing and the life expectancy of those. The 15 years also diversifies us, knowing that we have a large sum falling off in just a couple years. That goes ahead and pulls that out. It lessens the impact too, especially with the life it's going out much further than 15 years of the issuance. So I think that's too, you try to balance, as we look to diversify our revenue stream, you also look to diversify your debt stream. And that, is something we strategically did at 15 years in order to keep it lower. The lower you have that rate, the lower the impact to our operations fund too, right? So you're not harming yourself as you're trying to help yourself, but then it also diversifies knowing that we have a large amount coming off next year. To the roofing, that's one of the reasons it's also important to have the individualized projects, because your roofers aren't going to be bidding on your pavement. So if you have, like right now, I have $1 million tied into roofing at the high school. That's the amount that I have in this matrix. But then at the high school total, I have 4.2 million, because we also are looking at lockers, which are interior. We're looking at whether it be bathrooms or applied skills. Those things go across horizontally in this matrix. So, right now I have 14.2 built in off of some of the high pressing needs that, that keeps that lower, that keeps it definitely in a non-controlled, or what we believe is in a non-controlled setting, but then gives you even more capacity, as Jim showed, as you move along in a couple years. The total cost with that, I would show because taking into consideration the soft costs, you would probably have about 15 million once you add into the soft costs and the cost of issuance and stuff like that. So, if you said, hey, 15 million, you would obviously work yourself backwards to know also what you would have available to net spend for our vendors, holding enough back for the issuance and the soft costs.
So where's the $30 million? Is that just arbitrary?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just trying to give you different examples of what you have available, not even just today, but more so, hey, Jamie, we think that 15 million landing spot's the sweet spot. Then you would have that ability then, John, because I think you had asked that question before in a prior meeting of what that would look like for years to come. I just wanted to show that you would still have that capacity if something else came up to be able to utilize the debt.
So what's the disadvantage to, let's say we wanted to do 30 million, but we only wanted to do a 10 million, and then 18 months from now, or whenever the time, another 10 million, and then let's say 5 years from now, the third 10 million.
I think the disadvantage would be additional cost of issuance each time, right? You would also want to make
hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. You would also be exposing yourself to not knowing what those interest rates were doing, because right now with what he's showing you, I think he assumed a 5% in there. That's not something that we can control, but we do control what we can, which is again why I had you pass that resolution to reimburse, because if we use some of our funds up front and then repay ourselves, we're not paying interest on that later. But I would also say, if I'm Jane right now, she's probably in her mind thinking, you also want to make sure that you're not having a continuation and expose yourself to a controlled project. You would want to make sure it's still bucketed. Hey, that 14 million initially is non-control. You don't want to have a continuation in 18 months. It would still want to be a standalone, separated project. Yeah. But obviously very easy to do with the amount of needs that we have throughout the district. Great.
That's the point I would want to emphasize. I've been doing this now for a few decades, and the fact that you have a low tax rate in and of itself is never justification for incurring debt. I don't care what you say. But if you have needs that you can show, and I think Karen's done a very probably commendable job of understating those needs, I don't think you should have any lumps in your pillow, so to speak.
This doesn't, it's a financial question, but it doesn't really have to do with bonds. I lose sleep over the fact that we've not added to rainy day in my entire time on the board any significant amount. And, I sleep better knowing, I'd like to see us have some mechanism where rainy day at minimum keeps up with inflation. I don't know what that takes, and I know it's not, but we have the, I don't know, is it 4? I forget what the total is, but it's set at that number the entire time.
Yeah, if I could just speak to the past practice of that, we didn't sweep funds to rainy day. We held them in education. We have grown funds in education fund, and then had to use some when we made decisions that required that. But instead of sweeping and then sweeping them back for temporary loans, that's why you don't see that move into rainy day, because we were then temporarily borrowing them, and it just prevented that extra couple of action items because it just sits there. And then if, decisions are made to use that cash balance, then that's there and you made those decisions. So that's why you haven't seen that. It's not that we haven't been adding balance in a way in which it's been there. It's just we haven't swept it. So I just need you to understand.
It's not grown though.
Rainy day hasn't, because we left it, we used to. So when you first came on the board, we used to sweep the funds.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so we quit doing that. So they stay in their
I think we
fund.
should get in the practice of doing that again.
That's fine.
So
That's fine.
if I may, one of the practices that I'm accustomed to, I think to your point, John, is really looking at, and you'll see that in January, I think is usually when I am used to reporting it in my previous endeavors, looking at not just the rainy day fund, but the cash balance totals between the funds, and making sure that you are above a certain threshold. Like I always like to have an unencumbered cash balance of. However, with that said, I also liked to save for a rainy day in rainy day. So what I also have, I have previously implemented a practice where within rainy day, you started to save for other projects. For example, if we're doing a turf, where you need to recarpet and you're going to have and incur that cost in 15 years, and that cost is projected to be X amount. You can start saying, if we start to underspend in the operations fund, divide that over 15 years, and then at the end of that 15 years, my prior school district is not going to need to issue additional debt on that turf. They have it in that saving rainy day fund. So I would bucket within the rainy day, separate projects, report that to the board. So you would see it grow, sometimes for distinct purposes, sometimes just because usually that's money you can more so invest. But I will also say, with the way the state is, and I think Brent and Elizabeth can shake their heads on this, the state has been very delayed in approving grants because there are so many of them. They are very far behind on approving them. So we are utilizing some of that to carry while we're waiting on them to approve those so we can request reimbursement from them. So I think it's important to have, but there is something to be said of if you underspend, to absorb some of that in the fund that you're underspending and then quote unquote sweeping it over.
And I don't know what the will of the board is. Personally, I like those accounts because they're restricted. I mean, rainy day is restricted. And I don't know what it's going to be 15 years from now. And so if I have an account, if I have significant dollars, I mean, daily, if you guys are in and out of that account, I don't have a problem with that. I just need to see that number so a board 15 years from now, if the economy if they need money, access to cash, it's available. I don't know if it's a football field or a roof or a building collapse. I don't know what it is, but I want, when I want significant savings that I can address if needed. So that's all. I mean, daily, in and out, that's fine, but that number is held flat, and I think it needs to personally.
The good news to that though is that it hasn't been spent either, but yeah. I understand your point.
The only time I think when I first came on the board, they had borrowed against, or made there was a big deal that they were borrowing for the laptops. And then the only time I can recall the board talking about spending rainy day money was when we were looking at virtual school for COVID. That we thought we could possibly pull out dollars to hire staff for that virtual school. And that's been the only thing, and I would think that would be a valid use.
Is there a certain recommended percentage of you know, the overall budget for a typical
Depends who you
school
ask.
set? Okay, so there's not
The
an-
more
an
conservative, in
average
fact,
for
I
what-
just was on a school
There's
board.
probably range there,
or-
right?
I don't know if any of you were on it. There was a school board association presentation that touched just on that. That is something you will have from me, if not in January and February, as we try to close all the year ends, and you'll see that range. It depends on the needs of the school. It depends on the outgoing expenses. You know, some people say 3 months, some people say a 6 month of your expenditure in unencumbered reserve. I think it's intentional to what the board's comfort level is. If you say, hey, that is a 20% mark, that's what we aim for, and you have that, and you can see that's then the reason to intentionally grow to that. I've always liked a 15 to 20% is usually that sweet spot. For me, I do have actually it put together as I was going through that. I thought, well, I might as well just build this now as I'm listening to the webinar. So we are at a decent cash balance. However, with the other circumstances that we know that are out there, you also need to make sure that you do have, because of the individual nature, maybe there's reasons to go above that. But yeah, there is.
I have a thought, and I'm just gonna use Hibbert as an example, you know, seeing like the repairs are 8 to 10 million, rebuilds 10 to 14, be overestimated, conservative. But me being new and like seeing sort of this, like these numbers, like I would be interested in looking at something like Hibbert where it's not technically like a neighborhood school, right? We have logos and STEAM and like skills and looking for a new facility for them. You know, is it really like a quote unquote field house type? Because I know the kids there, my son's there. They are like more interactive. They're trying to push that.
Multi-use.
Yes, multi-use, make it more feasible for applied skills. I don't know where that goes, where that building is, but I know.
And there's we would have to have a lot of conversation because
Right.
there's options.
Mm-hmm.
It may be that, it does more new things than what's in it now.
Right.
So that when you talk new, you
Mhm.
have, sky's the limit.
Right. It's just, I
So-
think Hibbert too, was it closed for a while and then it was reopened?
Yeah.
Just like if, it seems like a lot of money going into that and it's still probably just Band-Aids a little bit.
Yeah.
Because of the issues. So, we're talking about money, how
And I think
can we-
that's a good example of a controlled project when debt frees up too, because there's so much need at a singular space. That would probably get into more of that controlled limitation to John's point, a second issuance that could open yourself up into a controlled, like if you say, hey, today, Jamie, let's work under the thought of 15 or 20 million, whatever that is, that ceiling. And then in 2 years, okay, now we need to really tackle this and start planning for that, because really in 2 years you start planning soon for things like that to do it more natural. Then you could start working in a controlled atmosphere because it's a singular guided issue for a building construct.
Yeah.
Karen, speaking of Hibbert, that number repairs, does that include like repairing the swimming pool area for the Hibbert STEAM, like to make that into okay, that does include that.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay, and so it sounds like you're needing to know a number. That's what I'm hearing, right? Yeah.
Or priority. I think we need more than a number. We need to know what's priority to you guys because we have to build a plan for what's going to get done with those numbers.
Gotcha.
Can we get the matrix that you have so we're working off the same document? And then
I wondered that too. I actually was wondering if we could, if you could present the matrix along with maybe even a recommendation with what your thoughts are, and then we could at that point, having, had time to mull this over and, look at the ins ins and outs than say, okay, and kind of find.
My recommendation would be to keep this moving, is you are just setting a maximum. You can come back, so if we put a public notice out that says, we're going to issue not to exceed 20 million. You can come back as we go through this time frame that Jane put together and say, hey, let's go ahead and scale this down and scale this down. You can do that up to the time of issuance. Am I speaking off turn here? Okay. So that we can keep the project moving, and then I can share the matrix with you from the feedback that we receive as far as what the priorities are. So we can maybe hopefully do a best of both worlds.
Right, that's kind of what I'm.
I guess I would
Go
just
ahead, Ron.
refer you to the timeline. I don't think the intent was, unless I misunderstood the intent for tonight's meeting, was to get that commitment from you. I think you've got general information about the needs that Karen's given you that probably, if you look at those closely, will spark further questions. The 24th was when we looked at being able to determine A, to issue bonds, and B, the maximum amount that you would issue. And that's what?
Right,
Today's the
that gives us
13th?
Yeah.
So that's about 40 days from now.
We just have to issue a notice ahead of that meeting. Is that correct, Jane?
The notice doesn't have a dollar amount in it.
Okay.
Can I
Please.
get on this? So I think one thing that would be helpful is, as you're listening to what your administration has said, if you could send information to your board president about, I'm all in for 30, or if it's anything above 10, I'm not happy. Just any of that kind of information would be very helpful. And then any concerns about things you saw on the list that they should address, because Ron's right. You do have until January to have a board vote on it, but I think your administration wants to come back with good options for you that you feel like you can act on. So that the problem is there are a lot of meetings between now and then.
And then also I can have more of a actual amount for you guys, because if you say, hey, 12 million compared to 30 million, it's very different of that circuit breaker impact, and I just want to have that for you.
And will you send us that matrix in before we give feedback to Nicole?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you click on the cell, it will list the information from Karen's bullet points. It'll list like, hey, this is
corresponding.
It's corresponding.
Okay. Okay.
So does it need to be like a work session in early January, or probably? I mean,
We could do it that way.
I just don't know how we discuss these projects via email, or I'm not sure what.
Yep, we could
I
have
don't
that.
quite know how you do that. But I would think to sit down either, in public or a working group, but a work session I think would be fine. I don't know what you guys think.
I'm good with that. Are the rest of the board members?
Yeah.
Okay. And would that give you enough time? So, like, let's say January 10th, perhaps. Okay. Okay.
It does.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion on that before we move on? All right, let's move on to our consent items then. All right.
President Stokes, trustees, I come before you this evening to ask for approval of consent items 6.01 through 6.06, as well as the agenda associated with item 6.02, human resources.
A motion we approve consent item 6.01 through 6.06, including the addendum on our list.
Okay. Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second? Okay, questions or comments? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. All right, moving on then to action items.
President Stokes, trustees, with the action items, the first being 7.01, donations. We come before you this evening to ask for approval of the donations as presented in the amount of $1,550 for this.
I make a motion that we approve action item 7.01.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any questions or comments?
I had a question. The redonation, was it specific to a certain program other than athletics?
Ms. Weber, I will have to,
I believe that it has to do with the contract
Yeah.
that we're offering. And so,
Sports trainer.
well, it's part of that. They have there's a
Is that why the
marketing
new sign's out
contract.
there?
Yeah, it's all part of that contract, and they've provided just an amount as a donation at the discretion of the superintendent and how it's used annually, and I believe that that's what this was. Is that one-time donation.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. All right, next we have, Jamie's gonna talk to us about resolution number 2312-1. Jamie?
Yes. Sorry, as I try to pull back up my sheet here. Instead of just reading the resolution, I'm just going to say that the Board of School Trustees may approve the transfer of money from one major budget classification to another if the transfer does not require the expenditure of more money than the total amount set out in the budget as finally determined, and if the transfer is approved at a regular public meeting. So in front of you, you have a resolution and an exhibit that is requesting your approval for transfer of funds.
So moved.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Are there questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Mrs. Bolser, next resolution.
So at the last meeting, we talked about those year-end resolutions. This is one of those, and this is the same thing. It's just a transfer of appropriation that has already been appropriated. It's just doing it between major budget classification, and this is annual, and it allows the CFO to make transfers to properly close the books in accordance with Indiana code.
I move to approve 7.03.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Mrs. Bolser, the next resolution?
You have a temporary or emergency transfer to depleted funds resolution. This is allowing you for funds that have sufficient balance to any fund that needs money for cash flow purposes for year-end state reporting. This is an annual resolution to provide permission to the CFO to make transfers to properly close the books in accordance with Indiana code. An example of this is that Title I new fiscal year 24 budget that the state has not approved yet. They will because they're guaranteed funds, but they haven't approved it yet, so we can't seek reimbursements on those. So what we're going to do is transfer year-end to properly close those, and then within that resolution, we'll come back to you in January and report what we transferred, and then transfer that money back before June 30th of 24.
Great. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay. A second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Mrs. Bolser, our final resolution, please.
Yes, the last annual resolution, and it is the board may authorize the issuance of payments prior to board approval to avoid penalty and or interest charges and or allow daily operations to continue. Claims paid will be presented to the board for approval at the next regular monthly docket following the issuance of the payment.
So moved.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0.
I got one question for Jamie. If, for instance, on like 7.02 on the transfers, is it possible to put the name of what the account is? I know we have the account numbers, but just for simplicity,
I can. In fact, I hide the column just to keep it more compressed. So
I know,
can just
but I
unhide it and provide that in there. That's not a problem at all.
appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, moving on to 7.06, Mrs. Bolser.
In front of you is, I'm requesting a motion to approve the personnel hiring and background checks as presented. You can see in front of you, we had one alert, but nothing would exclude the employee from employment pursuant to statute.
I move to approve 7.06, the personal hiring and background checks.
Okay. We have a second.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, vote passes 7-0. All right, Mrs. Bolser, 7.07.
Dr. Wright, are you doing that? You too.
With item 7.07, I come before you all this evening to ask for approval of the settlement agreement and general release as presented.
All
Move
right,
for approval.
Second.
we've got a motion and a second. Questions or comments? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. All right, item number 7.08, Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, President Stoltz. Trustees, what you have before you is an overnight field trip request for our career tech students for our fire and rescue and EMT. This is optional. They get to sign up for it. It's over Christmas break. It's kind of their end of semester reward for all the hard work they put in. And so I would ask that you approve as presented.
I move to approve 7.08, the RHS Richmond Area Career Center overnight, as presented.
All right, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any questions or comments? Nope. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next, Dr. Wright, we have item number 7.09.
President Stoltz, trustees, I come before you this evening to ask for approval of action item 7.09, school board meeting dates.
Before we get
You already
motion.
modified one, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we add the January 10th date on there as a work session.
Yes, sir.
So I would move that we approve the meeting dates with the addition of the January 10th date.
I'll second that.
All right. Any additional questions or comments?
I wasn't sure why the change. I had the 10th originally as the meeting. I don't know, was it pushed back to the 24th for some?
Yes, I had asked Mrs. Bolser, she wanted a little more time. That was what your email indicated,
To
correct?
close the books.
I'm not available 24th, so I won't be there, but.
Okay.
So you can celebrate now or then.
Maybe
We're all the way
both.
through.
Maybe both.
But when I get to see you the 10th.
All right, any other questions or comments? Nope, okay. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. All right, next we have Mr. Baker, 7.10.
All right, Board of Trustees, I request that you approve the contract totaling $5,800 for Tyler Tarver. Tyler will be the keynote speaker at the RCS Summer of Learning Conference. The funding used to pay for Mr. Tarver's services is paid through the IDOE Summer of Learning Grant.
On motion, we approve 7.10.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Are there questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. All right, next we have change orders. Mrs. Skelton.
Good evening again. Before you tonight is one change order regarding the RHS mechanical modernization with Carroll Electric Inc. It is a tower bypass valve. It is a pretty pricey change order, but this was expected as part of the needs as we got in there. So tonight, a change order is before you for $66,613.40.
You say it was expected?
It was expected.
It was expected.
So is this a replacement or a change to the operation?
It is when you get in there, you might need it, you might not. So they needed it when they got in there. In the original specifications, it depended on the work when it was done. And and what I will say is when we originally approved this plan, we did not approve contingencies, so that change orders had to come to the board every time. So normally this would be a normal part of the contingency plan that just happens naturally with the project. We did not do that on this plan, so it is, we are still within that threshold that we would normally be. It's just that the plan on this one was different when we approved it.
I'll motion we approve 7.11, the change order for Carroll Electric.
We have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any additional questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. All right, next we have our preview of upcoming meetings and events.
President Stoltz, trustees, as was just approved, our next meeting will be the work session on January 10th of 2024. And our next business meeting will be Wednesday, January 24th at 5:30 right here in the boardroom. And on that day, both dates will continue to highlight the amazing things occurring here in RCS, as well as acknowledge areas of improvement.
All right, and adjournment, bell ringer.
Yes, President Stoltz and trustees, I ask that Mrs. Bridget Hazelbaker, our communications and marketing coordinator, join us at the podium with an amazing smile and information that will enlighten us all. Mrs. Hazelbaker, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Just bell ringers, if you guys saw some of the people coming in and out, but we had lots of concerts recently. So we had Star Vale concert, we had junior high orchestra, high school orchestra. So I just wanted to just applaud our music teachers, Tina Peterball. They've been even going out into the community. Michael West has been going out in the community. So they've just been doing a phenomenal job. So I just wanted to congratulate our students as the bell ringers this month.
Thank you, Mrs. Hazelbaker.
All right, anything else for the good of the cause? We want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and